Hello everyone and welcome back to Peaky Boardgamer. My name is Tarakos and I just came back from Essen Spiel, and the game I'll be explaining today is one of the games I bought there. The name is Harmonies. It's a game that combines mechanics of Athol and Cascadia, two games I really love, and after I've tried this one, I knew that I had to buy it. Let's move to the table and see how the game is played. At first, place the board in the middle of the table. This is a double-sided board. One side is for the solo mode and the other side is for 2 to 4 players. Place all tokens inside the cloth bag, and after you give it a shuffle, start to randomly draw 3 tokens at a time until you fill all slots in the main board. Then take the animal card deck and after you shuffle it, reveal the top 5 cards facing upwards. The rest of the cards remain in a face-down stack as a supply. Then create a supply of animal cubes in the middle. Then each player takes a personal board. These boards are also double-sided, and now all players must collectively decide which same side they'll be using throughout the game. It is recommended that for your first games you use this side. Select a player at random to be the starting player and then rotate the main board so that this arrow points to the starting player. Players can also use one of these handy scoring player aids. Use the correct side depending on the side of the board you have used. The game is now ready to start. In your game you can also use nature spirit cards. However, it is recommended that you don't use them in your first couple of plays. I will explain the normal game first, and towards the end of the video I will explain how these cards are used. A short interruption here simply to remind you that if you haven't done already, please subscribe to our channel. It will help the channel grow and enable us to bring more videos of your favorite board games. In the game, players alternate turns starting with the first player and then continue clockwise until the end of the game is triggered. Your turn always involves the selection of one of the token sets, which you will have to place on your personal board. Apart from that, there are also 2 optional actions that you can perform at any time during your turn. One of them is to take one of the available cards, but you can do this only once during your turn. The second one is to place animal cubes on your personal board if you satisfy the objective on your acquired cards. Placing cubes can be done any number of times during your turn. So, for example, you could start your turn by placing one of your cubes on your board, then select one of the token sets and place one of the tokens on your board, then take one of the available cards, satisfy another goal and place another cube, place the second token, the last token, and then maybe place another cube on the board. When you end your turn, you replenish the empty space on the main board with 3 new random tokens from the bag, and now it's the next player's turn. Now I will explain all the details of these 3 actions. The only mandatory action in your turn is to take one of the token sets from the main board and then place them on your board. These tokens don't have to be placed adjacent or adjacent to your previously placed tokens. You can also place tokens on top of other tokens. However, you can never exceed a stack of 3 tokens, and there are also some more rules I will now explain that have to do with what tokens can be placed on which tokens. There are 6 different types of tokens. Fields and river tokens are the only tokens that have to be placed on empty spaces on your board, and no other token can be stacked on top of them. Then you have mountain tokens. These can be placed in an empty space on your board, but you can also place another token on top of them, which makes a 2-level mountain. If you place a 3rd mountain token on top, then that's a 3rd level mountain and it's the highest mountain you can have. Then you have trees. After you place this token on an empty space on your board, then you have a level 1 tree and no other token can be placed on top of that. However, you can create taller trees by placing brown tokens in the bottom and then place one of the green tokens. Here I have created a level 2 tree. I can create the maximum tree level by having 2 brown tokens and then a green token on top. That's a 3rd level tree. Important! When you place your tokens, you can only place them on top of your other tokens and never beneath them. So this tree is finalized. I cannot place another brown token beneath to make it a third level. Finally, we have building tokens. Building tokens can be placed in an empty space on your board or on top of another building token, a single mountain token, or a single brown token. It can never be placed on top of a tree, a river, or a field. After you place a building token above any one of these three types, you create a building. So this is a building token, but it's not yet a building. After I place this here, I have created a building. After I place this building token here, this stops being a mountain and it's now a building. And after I place this on top of the brown token, it cannot become a tree anymore and it's now a building. After you create a building, nothing can be stacked above it. The landscapes you create with your tokens will worth victory points at the end of the game. Trees score victory points depending on their level, 1, 3 or 7 points respectively. However, brown tokens that have not yet become a tree score no victory points. Likewise, mountains score 1, 3 or 7 victory points respectively, depending on their level, but mountains will score nothing if they are not adjacent to another mountain. So, if you have mountains like this, you will score nothing, but if your mountains were placed like that, you would score 10 points. Next we have fields. One field on its own scores nothing. However, a field group of 2 tokens or more will score 5 points. A group of 2 fields and a group of 10 fields would both score 5 points. Next we have the river scoring. You only score one of your rivers, the longest one. A river consists of a group of adjacent river tokens. If the river splits, then you calculate the shortest distance from the start point to the end point. This river consists of 6 tokens. This diagram on your player aid card indicates that a river with a length of 6 grants 15 points. Every river token beyond 6 grants 4 more points. If you were using this side of the board, the only difference is in the scoring of rivers. This time you don't score your longest river. You score 5 points for every island created by your placed rivers. The placement of my rivers has split my board in 3 different islands and I would score 15 points at the end of the game. If I've placed another 2 tokens here, I would have created 4 islands and scored 20 points at the end of the game. Remember that if you don't manage to split your board with river tokens, you still have 1 island and you will score the minimum of 5 points. Finally, we have buildings. For your building to score, you must have at least 3 different colors adjacent to it. If you have so, then you gain 5 points. This building has 5 different colors around it and you score the points. If that was also a building, then it would score no points, because adjacent to it you can find only 2 different colors. Apart from creating landscapes, you also gain points by creating patterns depicting on animal cards. As an optional action, you can take one of the face-up cards in the middle of the table. Remember, you can only take 1 card during a turn. After you select a card, immediately replenish the empty space with a new card from the supply. Then take the card and place it in an empty card slot above your board. Then take animal cubes from the supply and place one of them onto each one of these cube slots on your card. You have 4 slots for cards. If you have no empty slot to place a new card, then you cannot perform this action. You can no longer take cards until one of your cards is fully satisfied, which would create an empty slot for a new card. Let's see how we satisfy the goals of cards. On the bottom of animal cards there is a pattern depicted, and that's exactly what you're trying to do on your board. What is important is the exact shape and not the orientation of the pattern. So now I have a level 2 mountain and 2 fields in a row, which is the goal of this card. If you have created a pattern of one of your cards, then as a free action, you can take the bottommost cube from that card and place it on the specific token which is illustrated on the bottom of the card. Also, it doesn't matter if you have created the pattern before you acquired the card. If I had the pattern and then gained the card, then as a free action I could also place the cube here. The tokens that belong to a pattern can also be used in another pattern. So, if I also had this card and placed these 2 tokens like that, I would satisfy also this pattern and place 1 cube here. Very important, after you have accomplished the pattern and scored it with a cube, you can change the pattern afterwards. So, I could place another mountain token here without affecting the already scored pattern. What you cannot do is place 2 cubes on the same token or place a token on top of a token that has a cube on. Now, if in the future I placed this field here, I would satisfy this pattern again and I would take the last cube, placing it here. When the last cube is removed from a card, then the card is fully accomplished and is removed from your slots and placed in a stack next to your board with all your fully scored cards. At the end of the game, you will score the victory points depicted in the topmost empty cube space of your cards, so in that case I would score 4 points. Cards that were fully scored will score you the victory points depicted in the topmost space, so 12 points in that case. If you took a card but never managed to remove any cube, you will score no victory points. The game's end is triggered in 2 ways. One way is when at the end of your turn there are not enough tokens in the bag to fully replenish the empty space on the main board. The other one is if at the end of your turn you have 2 or less empty hexes on your personal board. If the end of the game is triggered, then continue playing until all players have had equal number of turns in the game. So if that player triggered the end, that player would also take a final turn, but if that player triggered the end, the game would end immediately after that player's turn. In scoring, you can use one of these handy scoring sheets to tally up your score. Let's make an example of one player's scoring. Players score for their cards and for their landscapes. From cards, this player gains 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 6 points, and from this fully scored card, the player scores 12 points. For trees, players score 10 points. For mountains, the players score 11 points. From fields, the player scores 10 points. The longest river of the player scores 8 points. And finally, the player has 2 buildings eligible for scoring and gains 10 points. These buildings have at least 3 different colors around them. This building only has 2, and this is not even a building. After tallying up the score, the player with the most victory points wins the game. If there is a tie, then the winner is the tied player that has placed the most animal cubes. If the tie still exists, all tied players share their victory. Now we'll explain the advanced variant of the game that uses Nature Spirit cards. If you decide to use Nature Spirit cards, then during setup, randomly deal 2 of these cards to each player facing downwards and also give each player 1 white Nature Spirit cube. The owner of the cards cannot reveal them until they take their first turn in the game. When that happens, the player will select 1 of these cards to keep and the other is returned back in the box with the rest of the cards. The selected card is automatically placed in one of the 4 slots of the player and then you place the white cube in the dedicated space on the card. These cards are similar to normal animal cards. They depict a pattern goal, and after you manage to accomplish this goal, you place the white cube as normal, and the card is placed with your other fully scored cards. Accomplishing this card unlocks your special scoring at the end of the game. So, with this card, for example, at the end of the game, every instance of a single filled token on your board will worth 2 victory points. Every instance of a group of 2 fields worths again 2 victory points, but every group of 3 or more fields grants 10. All other cards work in a similar way. If we go back to our previous scoring example, and that player had accomplished the pattern of their Nature Spirit card, then that player would score another 2 points for this group of fields and another 10 points for this group of 3 fields. That would go on top of the normal score. The game can also be played as a solo with very few differences that I will now explain. In the setup for the solo game, you use the side of the main board depicting only 3 token slots, and you only reveal 3 face-up cards instead of 5. You play the game as in the normal mode. The only difference is that at the end of your turn, you remove all other tokens from the main board out of the game. Then you replenish all 3 slots with new tokens from the bag. Also, if during your turn you did not take a card, you may remove one of the cards from the game and replenish the slot with a new card from the supply. In scoring, you score exactly in the same way, but then you convert your points into sun symbols according to this diagram. You score additional sun symbols depending on the side of your personal board, and also depending on the type of your nature spirit or whether you have used spirits or not. And that were the rules of Harmonies. If you like our videos and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. Until next time, have fun and play more board games.